Hello and welcome to The Essential Reads. My name is Isaac and my goal is to bring to you a bunch of classic audiobooks in an easy and accessible way. We are continuing with Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoyevsky, and this is Part 2, Chapter 5. This was a gentleman who could no longer be described as young. There was an imposing, standoffish air about him, and he had a face that expressed peevishness and caution. The first thing he did was to stand still in the doorway and look around him with unconcealed and sour astonishment, as if he were wondering, where's this I've ended up? Suspiciously, and with the affectation of a certain alarm, of offence even, he viewed Raskolnikov's camped and low-ceilinged ship cabin. With the same look of astonishment, he transferred his gaze and fixed it upon Raskolnikov himself, undressed, unkempt, and unwashed, lying on his dirty little sofa, and considering him with a similarly motionless stare. Then, with the same slow look, he began to examine the dishevelled, uncombed, and unshaven person of Razumikhin, who in his turn looked him cheekily and questioningly straight in the eye, without moving from the spot. The strained silence lasted for about a minute, and then finally, as one might have expected, a slight alteration took place in this dramatic tableau. Having come to the conclusion, assisted doubtlessly by certain decidedly uncompromising features of the situation, that in this ship's cabin nothing whatever were to be attained by a mien of such exaggerated severity, the newly arrived gentleman softened his manner somewhat, and politely, though not without sternness, turned to Zosimov, and, rapping out each syllable of his question, enunciated, "Rodion Romanovich Raskolnikov, student or ex-student?" Zosimov slowly stirred, and might even have ventured a reply had not Razumikhin, who was not part of the proceedings at all, at once got in before him. "That's him there, lying on the sofa. And what might you be after?" This familiar "and what might you be after" fairly brought the standoffish gentleman up short. He even turned slightly in Razumikhin's direction, but managed to restrain himself in time, and moved back quickly to face Zosimov. "This is Raskolnikov," Zosimov drawled, casting a nod in the patient's direction. Then he yawned, opening his mouth inordinately wide as he did so, and keeping it that way for an inordinately long time. After that, he slowly felt round in the pocket of his waistcoat, took out a most enormous, bulging, solid gold watch, opened its cover, glanced at its dial, and slowly and lazily put the thing back in his pocket again. As for Raskolnikov, during all this time he lay on his back, not saying a word, staring intently, though without any reason that was particularly apparent, at the man who had come in. His face, which he had now turned away from the interesting flower on the wallpaper, was extremely pale, and displayed an expression of uncommon suffering, as though he had just undergone a painful operation, or had, only a moment ago, been released from torture. Gradually, however, the newly arrived gentleman began to occupy more and more of his attention. This state of attention changed to bewilderment, then suspicion, and finally something that resembled fear. Indeed, when Zosimov, pointing at him, said, "This is Raskolnikov," he suddenly roused himself in a hurry, leapt upright, sat on the edge of the sofa, and in a voice which was almost challenging, but nonetheless faint and broken, articulated, "Yes, I'm Raskolnikov. What do you want?" The visitor gave him a careful look, and announced imposingly, "Pyotr Petrovich Luzhin. I hope and presume my name is not wholly unknown to you." But Raskolnikov, who had been expecting something quite different, looked at him dully and reflectively, and made no reply, as though this were the first time he had ever heard the name Pyotr Petrovich. "What, have you really not been told the news yet?" Pyotr Petrovich inquired, making a slightly wry grimace. In response to this, Raskolnikov slowly sank back on his pillow, threw his arms behind his head, and began to look at the ceiling. Consternation was now discernible in Luzhin's features. Zosimov and Razumikhin began to survey him with even greater curiosity, and he was finally unable to disguise his complete embarrassment. "I had assumed, and was counting on the probability," he mumbled, "that a letter which was entrusted to the mail more than 10 days, practically 2 weeks ago." "Listen, what are you hanging about in the doorway for?" Razumikhin suddenly said, interrupting. "If you have something to tell us, please sit down. It's getting a bit overcrowded over there, what with you and Nastasia as well. Nastasia, do stand aside and let the gentleman through. Come along, sir. Here's a chair for you. This way. That's right. Squeeze your way through." He drew his chair back from the table, made some space between the table and his knees, and waited in a slightly tense position for the visitor to squeeze his way through the small gap. The moment was chosen in such a way as to make refusal out of the question, and the visitor hurriedly squeezed his way through the narrow space, stumbling as he went. Upon reaching the chair, he sat down and gave Razumikhin a mistrustful look. "Please don't feel embarrassed," Razumikhin said carelessly. "Roger's been ill for the past 5 days and was delirious for 3. But now he's recovered, and he's even been eating with some appetite. That's his doctor sitting there. He's just been examining him. And I am one of old Rodka's friends, an ex-student like him, and I'm here making a fuss over him. So don't bother about us, and don't feel awkward. Go right ahead and say what it is you want." "I thank you, but do you not suppose that I may disturb the patient by my presence and discourse?" Pyotr Petrovich said, turning to Zosimov. "Oh, no," Zosimov drawled. "You may even provide him with some diversion." And again he yawned. "Oh, he came round a long time ago. This morning, actually," Razumikhin went on, his excessive familiarity taking the form of such artless good nature that, on thinking about it, Pyotr Petrovich found his spirits reviving. Possibly to a certain extent because this insolent ragamuffin had, after all, induced himself as having something to do with the university. "Your mother," Luzhin began. "Ahem," Razumikhin said loudly. Luzhin gave him a questioning look. "It's all right, I was just clearing my throat. Do go on." Luzhin shrugged his shoulders. "Your mother, during my sojourn in her vicinity, began a letter to you. Upon my arrival in St. Petersburg, I purposely deferred my visit to you for a few days in order to make quite sure that you would have been informed about the whole matter. But now, to my astonishment—" I know," Raskolnikov said with an expression of the most impatient vexation. "You're the fellow, aren't you? The fiancé. No, I know all about you. You said enough." This time, Pyotr Petrovich decidedly took offense. But he said nothing. He had lost no time in energetically seeking an answer to what the significance of all this could possibly be. A silence ensued, lasting all of a minute. Meanwhile, Raskolnikov, who had turned slightly in Pyotr Petrovich's direction as the latter made his reply, suddenly began to study him fixedly again, and with particular inquisitiveness, as though he had not so far managed to get a proper look at him, or had been struck by some new aspect of him. He even raised himself from his pillow especially in order to do this. There was indeed something singularly striking about Pyotr Petrovich's general appearance. Something which, as it were, justified the designation of fiancé that had been so unceremoniously conferred upon him only a few moments earlier. For one thing, it was obvious, too much so even, that Pyotr Petrovich had lost no time in making energetic use of his few days in the capital in order to smarten himself up and acquire some embellishments, pending the arrival of his bride. An activity that was, after all, perfectly blameless and within the bounds of decent behaviour. Even his own possibly too self-complacent awareness of his own gratifying change for the better might be forgiven in such an instance, for Pyotr Petrovich had entered upon the career of fiancé. All his clothes were newly procured from the tailors, and they were, all of them, excellent, leaving aside the fact that they were all too new, and were too divulgent of a certain purpose. Even his stylish, brand-new round hat bore witness to that purpose. Pyotr Petrovich treated it too reverently, and held it with too much caution in his grasp. His charming pair of lilac gloves, of real Juvian manufacture, bore similar testimony, if only because he did not wear them, but merely carried them around for show. Pyotr Petrovich's other garments were, on the other hand, of predominantly light and youthful colours. Wore a handsome summer jacket of a light brown hue, light-coloured, lightweight trousers, a waistcoat of the same material, fine linen that had just been purchased, the very lightest of pink-striped cambric cravats, and what crowned it all was that the whole ensemble actually suited Pyotr Petrovich to a T. Even as it was, his face, which was very fresh-complexioned and even handsome, looked younger than its 45 years. On either side it was presently overshadowed by a pair of dark side whiskers, shaped in the form of 2 mutton chops, and becoming rather elegantly brushy in the regions of his smooth-shaven chin, which shone to the point of glossiness. Even his hair, which contained only the merest traces of grey, combed and curled at the barber's, did not thereby impart to him a comical or stupid aspect, as is generally the case with hair that has been curled, since it gives one's face the inevitable look of a German going to the altar. No, if in this rather personable and commanding physiognomy there was anything unpleasant or alienating to be found, it proceeded from other causes. Having examined Mr. Luzhin without ceremony, Raskolnikov smiled a poisonous smile, sank back on his pillow, and began to look at the ceiling again. Mr. Luzhin, however, restrained himself, having presently decided to ignore all these eccentricities for the present. "I am most sorry to find you in such a plight," he began again, breaking the silence with an effort. "Had I known that you were unwell, I would have called earlier. But business, you understand. I have, what is more, a very important matter at the Senate, in my capacity as a lawyer. Not to mention certain other concerns, at which you may be able to guess. I expect the arrival of your family, your mother and sister, that is, at any moment." Raskolnikov began to stir, and appeared to be on the point of saying something. His face expressed a certain agitation. Pyotr Petrovitch paused in expectancy, but as nothing was forthcoming, he continued. "At any moment. I found them lodgings for their earliest convenience." "Where?" Raskolnikov said weakly. "Rather far from here. Bakaleyev's tenements." "That's on Voznesensky," Razumikhin said, chipping in. "There are 2 floors of rented rooms. It's run by a merchant named Luzhin. I've been there." "Yes, quite so. Rented rooms." "It's the most abominable place. Dirty, smelly, and of doubtful character, too. There have been incidents. The devil only knows who lives there. I looked in there once myself after some scandal or other. It's cheap, though." "Well, of course, I did not have so much information at my disposal, as I am new in town," Pyotr Petrovitch retorted delicately. "But I must say they are 2 most clean little rooms. And since it is only for a most brief space of time, I have already found a proper apartment, that is to say, a future one," he said, turning to Raskolnikov, "and it is now being decorated. And meanwhile I myself have squeezed into rented quarters in the apartment of Mrs. Lippezheshel, the abode of a certain young friend of mine, Andrei Semenovich Lebezhetnikov. It was he who directed me to Bakaleyev tenements." "Lebezhetnikov," Raskolnikov said slowly, as though he were remembering something. "Yes, Andrei Semyonich Lebezhetnikov. An official at the ministry. Is he known to you?" "Yes. No," Raskolnikov answered. "Forgive me. Your question led me to believe that he was. I was at one time his tutor. A very likable young man, but informed too. I like meeting young people. It is from them that one learns what is new." Pyotr Petrovitch examined everyone who was present with a look of hope. "In what sense do you mean?" Razumikhin asked. "In the most serious one. In, as it were, the very essence of the matter," Pyotr Petrovitch said, following on, as though well pleased by the question. "You see, it is 10 years since last I visited St. Petersburg. All these innovations, reforms, and ideas of ours. All these things have touched us in the provinces, too. But in order to obtain a clearer view, and one that is more comprehensive, it is necessary to be in St. Petersburg. Well, sir, and the opinion I have formed is that one notices and learns most by observing our younger generation. And I will confess, I have been encouraged." "By what exactly?" "Your question would take some considerable time to answer. I may be in error, but I have the impression of discerning a clearer view, more, as it were, criticism, more efficiency." "That's true," Zosimov said through his teeth. "Nonsense, there is no efficiency," Razumikhin said, seizing the bait. "Efficiency is acquired with some effort. It doesn't just fall from the skies. And we've practically spent the last 200 years getting out of the habit of all effective action." "Oh, it's true that there's a ferment of ideas," he said, turning to Pyotr Petrovitch, "and a desire for good, though it's a childish one. There's even some honesty to be found in spite of the fact that crooks have been arriving here in their droves. But efficiency, that there isn't. Efficiency requires a pair of boots." "I do not agree with you," Pyotr Petrovitch replied with visible pleasure. "There are, of course, enthusiasms and eccentricities, but one must be lenient. Those enthusiasms bespeak zeal for action. and the unfavorable outer environment in which that action must take place. If little has been done, then one must remember that there has not been much time either, to say nothing of means and remedies. If you desire my own personal opinion, quite a great deal has already been achieved. New wholesome ideas have been disseminated. Several new wholesome literary works have been received in circulation in the place of old dreamy romantic ones. Literature is assuming a more mature inflection, and many harmful prejudices have been uprooted and put to scorn. In a word, we've irrevocably cut our ties with the past, and that, in my opinion, sir, amounts to effective action. He learned all that by rote. He's showing off, Raskolnikov articulated suddenly. What did you say, sir? Pyotr Petrovitch, who had not heard him properly, inquired, but received no answer. It's all true enough, Zosimov hastened to interject. Do you not think so? Pyotr Petrovitch went on, beaming agreeably at Zosimov. You must agree, he continued, addressing Razumikhin again, but this time with a certain note of triumph and superiority, and nearly adding, young man, that there is at least prosperity, or, as is nowadays, progress in the fields of science and economic justice. That's a cliché! No, sir, it is not. Until now, if I were told, for example, love, and I obeyed, what came of it? Pyotr Petrovitch went on with just a little too much haste. What came of it was that I rent my kaftan in twain, shared it with my neighbor, and we both ended up half-naked. As the Russian proverb puts it, go in pursuit of several hares at once, and you will not secure a single one. Science, however, tells us, love yourself before all others, for everything in the world is founded upon self-interest. If you love only yourself, you will conduct your enterprises in a proper manner, and your kaftan will remain whole. Economic justice adds, moreover, that the more privately organized enterprise there is in society, and the more, as it were, whole kaftans there are, the more firmly it is founded, and the better the public cause is organized too. From this it follows that in acquiring wealth solely and exclusively for myself, I am, by virtue of that very same fact, acquiring it for all, and am contributing to a situation whereby my neighbor may receive slightly more than a rent kaftan. And this is not because of any private individual acts of generosity, but as a consequence of the resulting universal prosperity. A simple thought, but one that has unfortunately taken a long time to arrive, overshadowed as it has been by enthusiasm and proneness to dreaming. Yet no great wit would it seem to be required in order to summarize it. Well, you would have to forgive me. I'm afraid I'm another of those witless folks, Razumikhin said sharply. So perhaps we should forget it. I opened my mouth with a purpose, but all these self-indulgent bits of chatter, all these constant, incessant clichés, the same thing over and over again, have become so obnoxious to me that during the past 3 years, I swear to God, I blush when other people, let alone myself, utter them in my presence. You were, of course, in a hurry to show off your knowledge, and that's very excusable. I don't condemn it. All I was trying to do just now was to find out what sort of man you are. Because, you see, so many professional manipulators have battered on the public cause and have bent all that they touch to their own interest to such a degree that they've brought the whole cause into disrepute. Well, that's enough of that. Sir, Mr. Luzhin began, wincing with extreme dignity. Surely you do not mean to imply in this unceremonious manner that I, too... Oh, come, sir. What do you think I am? That's enough. Razumikhin snapped, turning suddenly in Zosimov's direction in order to resume their earlier conversation. Pyotr Petrovitch had enough sense to accept this response in good faith. He had, in any case, decided to leave in a minute or two. I hope that the acquaintance we have now begun, he said, turning to Raskolnikov, may, after you have recovered, and in view of certain circumstances with which you are familiar, consolidate itself even further. I particularly wish you good health. Raskolnikov did not so much as turn his head. Pyotr Petrovitch began to get up from his chair. It was certainly one of her clients who murdered her, Zosimov said affirmatively. That's right, Razumikhin replied in an approving tone of voice. Porfiry's not giving anything away, but he's questioning the clients all the same. He's questioning the clients? Raskolnikov asked loudly. Yes, what of it? Oh, nothing. How is he tracking them down? Zosimov inquired. Some of them were pointed out to him by Koch. Others had their names written on paper in which their goods were wrapped. And there were yet others who came in of their own free will when they heard. Well, he must have been a skilled and experienced blackguard then. What audacity! What resolve! That's exactly what it wasn't, said Razumikhin, interrupting. That's what's been throwing you all off the scent. No, in my opinion, he's neither skilled nor experienced, and he's probably a first-timer. If you assume that calculation was involved, and that he's a clever bastard, it all looks rather improbable. If, on the other hand, you assume he was inexperienced, it looks as though it was the only chance that saved him from disaster. And what doesn't chance get up to? For heaven's sake, he might not even have had any idea of the problems he might encounter. And how did he go about doing it? He takes some items worth 10 to 20 rubles each, stuffs his pockets with them, digs around in the old woman's chest full of rags, yet all the while in a cash box on the top drawer of the chest of drawers there's a good clear 1,500 rubles in gold. Never mind all the banknotes. He didn't even know how to conduct a robbery. All he knew was the business of killing. It was his first time, I tell you, his first time. He lost his nerve. And it wasn't calculation, but chance that got him out of it. I believe you are referring to the recent murder of the civil servant's widow, Pyotr Petrovich said, breaking into the conversation and addressing Zosimov. He now had his hat and gloves in his hand, preliminary to his departure, but wished to throw in a few more intelligent remarks before leaving. He was evidently concerned to make a favourable impression, and vanity had got the better of good sense. Yes, you've heard about it? I could hardly have failed to, sir. It happened in the vicinity. Are you familiar with the details? That I cannot comprehend. But what interests me most about the case is another aspect of it, one that relates to the whole question, as it were. It is not simply that during the past 5 years crime has been on the increase among the lower classes of society. It's not simply the high and unbroken incidence of fires and burglaries. What I find strangest of all is that crime is similarly on the increase even among the upper classes, running, as it were, in a parallel direction. Here is the news of an ex-student robbing the mail on the open road. Here, men who, by their social position, occupy a leading place in society are found guilty of forging banknotes. In Moscow, they have caught an entire gang who forged the tickets of the last lottery loan, and among the principal culprits was a university lecturer in world history. Abroad, the secretary of one of our embassies was murdered for some obscure financial reason. And now, if this old woman pawnbroker was murdered by one of her clients, it was doubtless a man of the more elevated classes. For mujiks do not pawn gold articles. And how is one to explain this immoral behavior on the part of the civilized portion of our society? There have been a lot of economic changes, Zosimov commented. How is one to explain it? Razumikhin said, rallying to the attack. Why, it may quite readily be explained by the all too deep-rooted lack of effective activity. Explain yourself more clearly, sir. Well, it's what your lecturer in world history replied when he was asked why he'd been forging lottery tickets. Everyone's making themselves better off by various means, so I wanted to do the same in as short a time as possible. I don't remember his exact words, but the gist of it was that he wanted it all for nothing, as quickly as possible, without any effort. People have grown accustomed to having everything ready-made for them. They're used to depending on the guidance of others, having everything chewed up for them first. Well, and when the great hour finally struck, they all showed themselves at face value. But do you not consider that morality is involved? And, as it were, the rules of... What have you got to worry about? Raskolnikov said, unexpectedly intervening. Why, it's all turned out according to your theory. What theory? Well, if you take those ideas you were advocating just now to their ultimate conclusion, the end result would be that it's all right to go around killing people. For goodness sake! Luzhin exclaimed. No, that's not right, was Zasimov's comment. Raskolnikov lay pale, his upper lip quivering and his breath coming with difficulty. Everything has its limits, Luzhin went on in a haughty, superior tone. An economic concept is not yet tantamount to an invitation to murder, and one has only to suppose... Is it true? Raskolnikov interrupted again in a voice that trembled with malevolent hostility, betraying a kind of pleasure in being offensive. Is it true that you told your fiancé, at the very moment you received her consent, that what appealed to you most about her was the fact that she is destitute? Because a man does better to take a wife from a poor background so he can have mastery over her later on, and be able to wield the constant reproach over her that he's done her a favor? Sir! Luzhin exclaimed in vicious irritation, flushing scarlet and thrown completely off balance. Sir! To distort my purpose in this manner. Forgive me, but I must tell you that the rumors that have reached you, or to be more precise, which have been brought to you, contain not a shred of solid foundation, and I have my suspicions as to who this arrow, to put it briefly, your mother. Indeed, I had already noticed that, for all her excellent qualities, her ideas are somewhat sentimental and romantic in nature. But even so, I was 1,000 versts from the superstition that she could possibly have construed and represented the matter in a form such as this, perverted by her imagination. And moreover... Do you want to know something? Raskolnikov exclaimed, raising himself on his pillow and fixing him with a penetrating, glittering stare. Do you? Well, sir? Luzhin stood still and waited with an offended, challenging look on his face. The silence lasted for several seconds. If you so much as dare to say another single word about my mother, I'll knock you head over heels downstairs. Hey, what got into you? Cried Razumikhin. Ah, so that's the way it is. Now listen to me, my good fellow. He began in measured tones, doing his utmost to restrain himself, but breathing fiercely nonetheless. From the very outset, as soon as I arrived here, I observed your hostility, but remained here on purpose in order to learn more. There is much that I am willing to forgive a man who is ill and a relative of mine, but now, I will never. I am not ill! Raskolnikov shouted. What a pity! Oh, go to the devil! But Luzhin was already on his way out, not bothering to finish what he had been saying, squeezing his way once again between the table and chair, and this time Razumikhin stood up in order to let him through. Without giving anyone another glance, and without even nodding to Zosimov, who had for a long time been motioning him to leave the sick man in peace, Luzhin went out, cautiously raising his hat to shoulder height as he bent down in order to pass through the doorway. And even the curve of his spine seemed on this occasion to say he was carrying away with him a terrible personal insult. We can't just let him go like that, can we? Said a perplexed Razumikhin, shaking his head. Leave me! Leave me alone! All of you! Raskolnikov shouted in a frenzy. But you leave me alone now, you torturers! I'm not afraid of you! I'm not afraid of anyone now! Go away! I want to be alone! 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 Come on, Zosimov said, motioning to Razumikhin. For pity's sake, we can't just leave him like that. Come on, Zosimov said intently, and went out. Razumikhin thought for a moment, and then ran to catch him up. It might have made him worse if he hadn't done as he wanted, Zosimov said on his way down the staircase now. He mustn't be made irritable. What is it that's wrong with him? If only he could be given some kind of beneficial shock. That's what he needs. He was all right just a while ago. He got something on his mind, you know. Some fixed idea that's hanging over him. I'm very much afraid that that's the case. And there's no doubt of it. Perhaps it's that gentleman, that Pyotr Petrovich fellow. From what they were saying, it appears he's getting married to Roger's sister. And Roger had a letter about it just before he fell ill. Yes, the devil must have brought him just now. He may have upset the whole process of recovery. By the way, have you noticed he's indifferent to everything? Doesn't say a word about anything except the one subject that sends him into a frenzy. That murder. Yes, Razumikhin said, following his train of thought. I've noticed that a lot. It interests him a lot. He gets scared about it. He got scared about it on the day he fell ill in the superintendent's bureau. He passed out. You can let me know some more about that this evening, and I'll tell you a few things afterwards. He interests me very much. In half an hour's time, I'll look in to see how he is. He won't catch pneumonia, anyway. I'm most grateful to you. I'll wait downstairs with Pashenka in the meantime, and Nastasia can keep an eye on him for me. When they had gone, Raskolnikov gave Nastasia a look of anguished impatience, but she seemed to be in no hurry to leave. Would you like some tea now? She asked. Later. I want to sleep. Leave me alone. With a cramped, convulsive movement, he turned to the wall. Nastasia went out. Thank you so very much for listening. If you enjoyed, please like, comment, share, all that jazz, and if you really enjoyed, do subscribe because there is more to come. If you're listening on podcast, please leave a review as it helps get this in front of as many people as possible, and reading your reviews really makes my day. If you want to support the show further, just listen to it while you're sleeping to help me get those monetization requirements on Spotify, as I can now get paid in Europe for that, which would be great. If you want to support the show further, you can click on the Ko-Fi link, which is now on screen, or you can find the same link in the description box. It's a great way to support the show, help improve this space, help improve, my equipment and whatnot, and give me more time to do this for you. Once again, thank you very, very much for listening. And until next time, bye-bye.